Hello, wherever you are in the world today. Welcome to Beyond the Art and our series, The Stories That Carry Us. I'm your host, Kay Walkingstick, a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and the Delaware Tribe of Indians. In each episode, we will discuss with various Native American artists, influencers, art leaders, and everyone in between their experiences, the communities they serve, and the translation and interpretation of the Native American art world today. Welcome to Beyond the Art today. Today we have with us Joe Williams, the podcast host of 5 Plain Questions and an artist, a storyboard artist. Joe, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and cultural heritage.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. This is an honor. I've really come to enjoy your podcast and what you all do here. It's great that you're doing this and sharing stories of really some fantastic guests, and I'm really impressed with your list so far. So congratulations.
Thank
you. My name is Joe Williams. I'm a Wahpeton Dakota from the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate. I was born on the Lake Traverse Reservation in South Dakota, born and raised there. Sort of a South Dakota boy for the most part. Went to the University of South Dakota. I was in the Army National Guard for 20 years. I went to, in short, the Academy of Arts University in San Francisco for my master's program, in which I got my Master of Fine Arts in storyboarding at the School of Animation there. I received my undergrad at the University of South Dakota in American Indian Studies. For the most part, I had gone through college as an art student, but as I got closer to the end of that experience, they didn't have the illustration program that I was kind of looking for. And I had taken so many of the American Indian Studies courses that I just made the switch over there to complete that program. And I'm glad I did. It was super interesting, great group of people that were there back then. And that's kind of in short of my background.
Encapsulated real quick.
Real quick, yeah, in a nutshell. But, during grad school, back in 2017, I had just returned from my third and final deployment, and I was looking for an internship at a museum, and my wife was in medical school at the time, and so I went to the local museum, the Plains Art Museum, and they had an opening for an intern in their Native American programs there, and so I applied to that, and I got that, and we all hit it off, and I'm now the director of that program. So I kind of joke that my being a director at the museum there is an internship that got out of control. So, but yeah, I've been there now as director for 4 years now, I believe. I've been in that role. So, but that's
what inspired you to do the podcast, and I mean, from your craft of being a storyboard artist to now a podcast host.
So the two are kind of similar, actually. To be a storyboard artist, you have to be a storyteller. You have to be able to know how to frame images to be able to tell a story. And of course, as a podcaster, you have to have some sort of ability inside you to be able to tell a story, to be able to frame a story that's interesting to your listener. And so the question is how does one do that, I guess. The podcast was something that I'd been interested in for quite some time. Wasn't quite sure what my platform would be. I really enjoy having conversations with people. I feel like I'm an engaged listener, and I have this ability to be able to really draw out stories from people. And quite often I would hear from just casual conversations, people admitting that they've never actually shared this before, or they sort of go to a place. And I always feel that that's a huge privilege, that someone finds trust in me in those conversations. So when I started at the museum and I started to curate exhibitions and put those together, I started to do the math on how many exhibitions we do a year. And let's say I stay at the museum for 20 years. Well, that means then I'll create about X amount of exhibitions. It will feature only so many artists. And I thought, well, that's not right. There's so many artists out there that I want to work with. And one thing that I found in creating exhibitions is that we're very limited on telling their story. Of
Mhm.
course, the platform is for them to exhibit their artwork. And we put together a story in those exhibitions about what they're trying to talk about. But an introduction panel and didactics can only tell so much about that individual. And I feel like this podcast is a companion to those exhibitions, that people can hear the voice of the artist. They can share space with that individual. And so when the pandemic hit, I sat down with my boss at the time and had a conversation with him. And to his credit, he said, "Go for it. Try the podcast." We kind of assumed we would do maybe 12 episodes. Just wait for the pandemic to
Right.
get over with, and we'll figure it out from there. And I set this ambitious goal of doing an episode a week, and not knowing how
I
much
hear
work that
you.
actually is.
I hear you on that.
So yeah. So we're about 150 episodes in now. We're in our fourth year, and it's a
Congrats.
very structured podcast. It's like the title of it is Five Plain Questions. We
Mhm.
present the questions to the guest, and we give them the space to be able to talk about that story. So yeah.
Very cool. Yes, I know the heartache, the trial, the tribulations, the growing pains in doing a podcast. How's it taken? I mean, 4 years is quite extensive, and congratulations again on 150 episodes. Has the platform or the subject line changed, or has it kind of taken a mind of its own, or you pretty much stayed true from the beginning to where you're at now?
I think the format has stayed true. I
Mhm.
generally ask the same questions. Sometimes I can't ask certain people in certain professions the same questions I would ask a studio artist. So the questions might
Right.
vary. Sort of the unspoken rule in it too is that it's five questions, but then there's a dozen follow-up questions. Because sometimes topics will come up and I just need to interject myself and ask another question or share
Right.
something that's come to mind, to build that rapport with the guest. So yeah, I think the more proper title of the podcast is five plain questions and 12 follow-up questions or something like that, right?
Hmm.
Um, but the neat thing about the open-ended questions, and I find that this is the same with your program too, is that not every episode is the same. Every
Right.
conversation is different. Experiences. Everyone has a unique, kind of a similar trait, but a unique story, of course. And
Mhm.
so every episode is you'll never hear the same sort of canned
True.
episode. Yeah.
True. Very, very true. And then
Mm.
being on the other side is those times where you kind of pre-interview somebody and they talk, and then you get them on the show. And it's like one word answer. It's like, elaborate, tell us more.
Yes,
The
yes.
challenges. Um, can you describe any of the challenges that you've had to face um, with this show and the Native American artist community and getting them on board to really tell their stories? Because I think it's indicative of Native Americans in our culture that we don't look for attention or be on the spotlight. So has that been a problem that you've kind of had to pull people into?
I have for sure. Just like you said, we'll have pre-interviews and post-interviews. As soon as the recording stops, then the conversations start. And it's like, oh, I wish I could grab these, but of course,
Yeah.
you have to build that trust. You don't want to violate that trust, and so I've had real fire in unrecorded conversations. We're still on the microphones. We're still face to face. But
Right.
even my last couple of guests are members of the 1491s, and they were saying, I think one of them even mentioned on the podcast that it's really hard for them to talk about themselves,
Hmm.
even though they're entertainers, even though they're in front of the camera. And that's just one of the traits of our culture, is that we try to serve community over ourselves. And
Hmm.
so with that in mind, I do remind the guests and sort of try to push the idea that the purpose of these conversations is to inspire younger people who are listening, for them to know the stories of people further down the path than they are, so that they have sort of a guide or an example to follow if that's what they want to do. And sometimes we'll ask the questions over again. I remember I had one young artist. She was very nervous, and we went through the interview, and we got to the end of it. And by the time we got to the end, about 45 minutes into it, she had loosened up, and she was finally like, because we know each other on the outside, right? And so to get her to be her normal sort of bubbly personality, it really took a while for her to get over the fact that, we were on screen together, headphones on, microphones, and once she got over that, we started the interview again. And so the interview that the listener hears is the second take of that whole thing. But we were able to draw out that guest. Also, too, I remind the guests sometimes when they are a little nervous that it's just me and them. It's just you and me having this conversation. And I always say listener. I don't say listeners or the audience. I say there's one person listening to this conversation with us, and it's the person that's listening to it, right?
Right.
And so maybe that helps my anxiety, because I can't think about it sometimes, Yeah.
True. And I think that warming them up too. And again, it's about them telling them story. And there's some hidden things there that I think, being on the other side and extracting it from them, because you kind of see it in the direction it's going, and then all of a sudden they'll stop. No, you have to elaborate, continue on. This is very interesting to me as the listener. I'm not just the host, but I'm also the listener. In what ways do you envision your podcast contributing to a broader understanding and appreciation of Native American culture, both within and outside the community?
Within the community, I try to make our conversations a trusted place for us to talk. I think so much online, especially online on social media, we're sort of in a place right now where we like to pile on. Everyone sort of attacks and piles on. And this is sort of the opportunity for us to have a trusted conversation, to be able to share their story. With this podcast, there's no gotcha questions. I'm not going to surprise you with a hard-hitting take on their life or on the decision that they've made in the past. I think too, for those outside the community, I want to humanize the story and the guest, of course. The podcast came on the heels of the Standing Rock, the protests that were happening out west. And one thing I noticed after Standing Rock was this disingenuous storytelling from the local media, a lot of which were controlled by oil money and local politicians and law enforcement. And I didn't like how the stories were not portrayed accurately and with a spin. And so I wanted to contribute to the regional conversation by having our guests tell their stories. And the podcast is audio only. There's no visual. So right away I remove a way the listener can interact with the podcast by just hearing the voice, and the individual is forced to listen to the artist or the guest. And then my hope is that, that they sort of experience the same hopes and fears and desires, and that the guest is sharing, because, at the end of the day, we're all contemporary people. We all have rent or mortgage. Some of us have student loans, we all have car payments. We all have security concerns in life. And that's something that's relatable. I don't care what community you're from. It may look different from person to person, from block to block. But I feel that if the listener can sort of slow down and just listen to what the person is saying, that it can humanize them. And from there, then a relationship could be built with the listener to the guest that can be trusted, and again, humanizes them.
So on your own, do you still practice your craft as a storyboard artist?
I do. So My day job is I'm a director of native programs at a museum. And that's my 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get home at night, if I'm contracted to do storyboard work, yeah, I will work on that till midnight, till 1 in the morning. That is definitely my passion. I love drawing. I'm working on some private commissions right now with the writer strike in Hollywood. That sort of
Mm-hmm.
stopped a lot of projects right now. So I like all the other storyboard artists right now. None of us are working. So yeah, so I'm just doing commissions at the moment. Drawing is an obsession with me. I have to be drawing. Even at
Yeah.
work, when I'm in meetings, I'm sketching. I don't know if I'm the best administrator out there, but
What's he doing again? He's doodling.
he's doodling. So, but yeah, storyboarding was something that I first went to California in 1999. I wanted to pursue that, and I just got out of basic training. San Francisco is a very expensive town to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
and when you're 20 years old and all you're getting is $98 from the National Guard a month, that's it's hard to live
I
like
go
that.
far.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm one of the few people that actually lost weight after basic training. So I got talked back to come back to South Dakota, and so uh, finished school and all that. And 15 years later, I still had that itch that I needed to follow through on. And so my wife and I decided to move out to California, and for me to pursue that master's. And I think the important thing about the masters was the networking that went in there,
Mm-hmm.
making those connections and meeting people. And when she started med school and I moved back, I really pushed that relationship building. And yeah, through that work, and even on the podcast, some of the guests have led to some projects that I've worked on. The last, I think, 3 years, I've been pretty regularly employed as a storyboard artist. So it's
Fantastic.
been great. It's really been
So
great.
you're juggling a lot.
I am. I don't sleep as much as I'd like to. But
I hear you.
it's at
I
sea.
hear you.
It,
What
yeah.
inspired you? What's that?
Oh no. It's the season, right? The season that we're in right now.
Yeah.
If I got the
Yeah.
energy, I'm going for it.
Yeah. I can't sit idle. I don't like sitting idle or resting or tuning out. I have to continue work the brain. What inspired you to become an artist, and were there any specific experiences or moments that sparked your creative journey?
If I'm being fully honest, I got bullied quite a bit as a kid. I'm half native. I'm half white.
Mhm.
Growing up in rural South Dakota, that can be challenging. Sisseton is a checkered reservation, meaning that there are plots of land that are federal and tribal lands, and then other parts of it are non-native land and city-owned, county-owned, state-owned. And so I would, grew up on the res, but I went to a public school. And, at the public school, I was the Indian kid. When I'd go to the tribal school, I was the white kid.
Right.
And, when you're 12 years old, you can't win. You can't win
Yeah.
that fight. And so I really sort of internalized everything and started drawing quite a bit. And when I was in high school, I was a freshman. My art teacher had found this pamphlet for this summer program called the Oscar Howe Summer Art Institute. I had no idea who that was. I didn't know what this was, but it was a 2-week summer program at the University of South Dakota. Native high school kids could go to the college for 2 weeks, and you would learn the foundations of art. And so I kind of put it off because I didn't really want to go to school in the summertime. The summers to have
Right.
fun. And one night, I was watching. This is back in '93, April of '93. We're watching PBS. There was a show on an artist named Robert Penn, and
Mhm.
he was a Lakota artist, Rosebud, and he was the apprentice of Oscar Howe. And when it was done, my dad had asked me if I had filled out that application yet, and I said no, I hadn't done that. And he's like, "You're going to fill it out." I was like, "Okay." So filled it out. My mom helped me mail it. And to my surprise, I got accepted to the program. And so I went down. It was the first time I was ever away from home for that period of time. I
Mm-hmm.
thought all these kids are going to beat me up. I was like afraid. Yeah, I was afraid of everyone.
Right.
And turns out that, there was, about a dozen, 15 other native high school kids there, all nerds like me. They just love to draw. Um, we formed this tight bond. It was an intense program. I mean, it was all day, all evening. We were doing artwork, and that was the beginning. I left that program with this self confidence that I sort of knew who I was at this point, and so I went back every summer for that. I got accepted back every summer to go to that program,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think artistically, Oscar Howe, who is a artist from South Dakota, uh, he has there's an amazing exhibition on him right now called Dakota Modern, curated by Kathleen Ashmilby out of the
Mm-hmm.
Portland Art Museum and the Smithsonian. There's a wonderful book that goes with it, and I recommend everyone pick up that book, that tells the life of Oscar Howe, who really is the the genesis of contemporary Native American art.
Sure.
If it weren't for him, and not just his famous letter that he wrote, but his passion for education and inspiring generations of artists behind him,
Right.
we wouldn't be where we are now. But his apprentice, Robert Penn, was my mentor at college. And so I would go out to the farmhouse and, I'd spend time out there with him. I knew him for about 4 years before he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the uncle that, yeah, I guess, the uncle that I needed, I guess. So yeah, those
Right.
two were the beginning of sort of this journey that I'm on.
How do you choose your subjects and mediums, and how do you approach your creative work? Is there a specific process for you?
I I love figure studies. I love drawing the human
Mm-hmm.
figure. Um, there's the whole stories can be told just by drawing the human figure. I mean, this has been, the case for centuries, of course. Um, I've because I went to the academy in San Francisco. Uh, they had stressed, contemporary animation in the industry now. Because I'm a storyboard artist, um, my work is more. It's basically all commission based, right? I'm not a studio artist per se. Uh, there's sort of a craftsmanship to this type of work or this approach.
Right.
So um, everything is digital now. The days of paper animation on pencil are for the most part over, unless
Right.
you're like a very specific studio in Korea or in Japan who still works in sort of that old way. Aesthetically, they choose to do that. You won't find paper animation
Mhm.
as the norm in the big studios
Right.
here nowadays. So everything's digital. So yeah, I work digitally. Um, and so yeah, my studio space, I've got my large Cintiq and my Macs up, and it's everything is all it's all digital. And once I get drawing, I upload it and send it off to whoever is commissioning me to do my work. Um, for the most part, I'm sort of dictated on what I come up with.
Mm-hmm.
The director or the individual who's commissioning me to do the work will have sort of a set of guidelines, or they'll send me a script. And so let's say it's a director, right? And they want their piece storyboarded. And just for the listener, a storyboard artist, what storyboards are is a first pass at a film visually from the script, and so
Right.
it gives the director and the cinematographer, they take a look at it. They sort of see what the film will look like before they commit
Mm-hmm.
money, time, and resources to actually filming it. It's sort of the pre-production planning process. And so, yep, I'll get the script. Uh, Understanding script language, film language, I understand just by reading the script what the director's looking for as far as like framing and setups and everything. And so I'll do some thumbnails, real small, short 1-inch drawings, little scribbles, I'll send that to the director. The director will say, "Yep, I like where this is going. No, let's change this," and then I will work on the storyboards. Generally, it's about 5 to 7 passes on a storyboard before we get it right. So you have to have very little ego when you're actually doing these, because the vast majority, the patience too, but the vast majority of the work that you create gets thrown away. Like it'll never go anywhere. Because the goal of a storyboard artist is to make sure that the director has what they need to create this film. You're there to serve them. And so, um, you know, um, you have to be able to take direction, literally from a director, right?
Right.
And to be able to serve them. So if you can get outside of your ego, it can be a lot of fun, And also too, it's kind of cool because you get the first pass at a script, and so sometimes you do something,
happen.
you know what's going to happen, but it's kind of neat too. And the director's like, "Oh, I like that. I didn't think about it like that." And all of a sudden, you're like, "Oh, I had a little part of something," and those are little bits of magic that happen there.
Sometimes, I know the industry, and they take that storyboard or that image, and that's actually the frame of what they're shooting as well. It's kind of interesting to see that come alive. Are all the storyboard commissions that you do, are they related to Native American stories, or it's across the board?
It's across the board. The majority have been Native. Yeah, I was working on a feature at the beginning of the pandemic, but they got shut down. Everything got shut down, so that didn't go anywhere. But yeah, I think right now it's a lot of Native works, because of my network, and I love it. I'm absolutely thrilled. It is neat too, because as a Native artist, someone that grew up on the res, I'm able to sort of understand the nuances of what the director wants to get at, that maybe a non-native wouldn't pick up on. And so I think it's really important for Native directors to consider having Native staff on their crews, so that maybe there's a little more buy-in or a deeper understanding of what they're trying to do. And
Yeah, they know the stories firsthand, so they're part of that process. Are there, you mentioned Oscar Howe, are there any other particular artists, both within the Native community and beyond, that have influenced your style or perspective of Native American art?
I think across the board, I get sort of inspired all the time, especially the guests that come through my show. I'm generally a fan of their work. Number one, I really like what they're doing. I really like their approach on things. Currently at the Plains Art Museum, we have Gerald Canoyer up right now. He's a Lakota artist. He went to USD as well. He focuses on symbolism, Native American traditional symbolism, and so I think that's super interesting. We have Deanne Whitehawk, who's very traditional in her imagery, but what I love about her work and her approach, one, she's one of the most intentional people I've ever met, where she's 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of where she's at right now. Like, she knows what's around the corner, and I love that about her. And she really pushes the truth that, Native women need to be telling their story. It does not need to be curated through non-natives or Native men. Like women need to be upfront and telling their stories, and I absolutely love that. Yeah, Randy Red Star, her humor kills me. Like, I see the work that she does, and one, she's a fantastic artist, right? That's a given. But there is that Native humor that's in her work, and I invite the listener to explore her work. It is satirical. It's biting. She is someone very special too. But gosh, I hate to throw names out there because I'm going to miss someone, especially some really big people. Hillary Kempeneck up in northern Minnesota, another one that's just a fantastic artist.
Who have you had on your show that's kind of just floored you? You've been like awestruck by the amount of information and what they provided on the show.
Uh, I had Jean Quick to see Smith on. Uh, I didn't think that would happen only because of who she is. And just
Right.
right off the bat, she's like, let's do it. I'm like, oh, okay. I remember being nervous about her. Kay Walkingstick is another one. Kay was so generous with her time. It was, I think, like a 2 hour conversation.
Wow.
My, for the program that I do, we usually go about 45 minutes with the conversations, but she wanted to make sure that she told her story.
She had
And
a lot to say.
she had a lot to say, and every word was worth it. Um, yeah, it's I have a couple upcoming guests that I actually can't talk about that I'm just floored that I have them. Um, but it's I always feel it's a privilege to sit down with anyone,
Hmm.
to get their time,
Absolutely.
and I don't know if I get as nervous or starstruck, with everyone, but I'm deeply grateful for those conversations. And I always feel like I have a friend after those conversations. It's,
Right.
I don't know if it's the truth or not, but I'm just like, oh, I just, spent time with so and so, and I'm on this high for a couple of weeks after those
Yeah.
conversations.
And it's like, I'm not hearing from them. Should I call them? What's going on?
I know,
We just spent
or
an hour together.
sometimes what happens is like here at the market, I'm sure I'm going to run into people and be like so happy to see them, and they're like, oh yeah, you're that guy we talked to a couple years ago, and
Yeah.
I'm like,
You're like, shot down. Boom, boom.
yes, yes.
Who does your booking for your show? Do you do it yourself? Are you a one-man show or do you have a mini
it's a
crew?
one it's a one man band. It's I wish the museum could afford a staff for me, but it's just me just emailing uh, for weeks, months, a couple times. It's been a couple years worth of tries to get them on.
What advice would you offer to emerging Native American artists?
Show up every day to work, whether it's just cracking open your sketchbook and
Hmm.
working on something, but be intentional about the work. Don't take don't take a lot of time off. Sometimes after a market or after a show or after an event, an artist will want to take some time off from the work. Don't do that.
Hmm.
I think that's a pitfall. Uh, Stay hungry, especially when you're younger in your career. Try to say yes to a lot of stuff, and because I think saying yes to a lot of stuff will lead down to paths that you weren't expecting. I think, especially with the young artists, a lot of them have like this 5-year plan that
Right.
they're gonna do this in 5 years, and 99.9% of the time it doesn't happen. And it leads to a lot of anxiety and pain for those young people who want to stay fixed on that. But if you stay open minded to new opportunities, put your ego aside and just explore, see what's out there. But keep showing up for the work though. I think because I think technically the best artists that I've known in the younger days who sort of were all ego, they knew that they were a great drafts person and they figured everyone was going to roll onto them. They're not around,
Right.
they're living their life, but they're not living the life that a lot of artists are living, who remain flexible. But I think the ones that are getting the big shows that are being represented, they're the hardest working people.
It's
And
persistence too, and dedication. It's
mhm,
dedication to your craft, but also dedication to yourself.
yeah, the other thing too is what I find is be good natured. Try not to create a lot of drama, because if you treat people a certain way, you start to miss out on opportunities. So often I find some of the guests that I've had on our show, uh, who are just the most graceful. I can't talk today. The most gracious and respectful are the most successful ones. The ones that don't need to be on the podcast. They don't need to spend time with me to. I mean, they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, but they're also just professional and nice and just wonderful to be around. Jean Cook to C. Smith has no reason to email me as much as she does,
You can
but
give her
she
my
does.
number.
Absolutely. But she checks on in on everybody, because she'll message me. It's like, hey, do you have so and so's email address? I'm like, I do, yes. And it's a student that she had met, years before. And so, I mean, not to tell her personal business, I guess, but
Right.
it's
It's
just a
integrity.
good nature.
It's good nature and integrity
It is.
that they do care.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, collaboration and community are important aspects of indigenous cultures. Have you collaborated with other artists or worked within your community? And how has that impacted your art and your connection to your heritage?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a really good
You can
question.
steal that.
Okay. On the next episode of Six Plain Questions.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, collaborations are it's a very special way of connecting with the community. As a storyboard artist, by its nature, you're collaborating with someone.
Mhm.
I don't write scripts. I'm not a filmmaker, so I have to work with someone to make that happen. And they, if a director wants to, not to make this a sales pitch, but if they want to save money and have a good plan, they should contact a storyboard artist, and put things on paper, right?
Mhm.
But filmmaking I mean, you can talk to any filmmaker. Filmmaking is a collaborative uh, experience. Musicians as well. I think it's also just a really great way to connect to community, because especially as Native and Indigenous people, we are not just a one-off solo individual like on the mountaintop. We all have families, we all have community. And so when you work closely with someone, you get to know their family, you get to know their kids, and oftentimes you find that there are other creative people that surround them as well, and that may lead to other opportunities as well. And I think that's why our communities are so strong. Our sense of
Mhm.
family is something special within this American construct that we have, and um, I think that's a wonderful thing. At the Plains Art Museum where I work, my job is, I mean, I do exhibitions, I curate shows, but 80% of my work is being in the community and finding people and connecting with people to see what we can do as a group, uh, to really enlarge our footprint as a community. Um, I will. So I'm on like the Fargo Arts Commission. I interact with a lot of folks in Fargo, and I really push the idea that Native identity is Fargo identity. Fargo is not the city of Fargo, and we have Native Americans here. The Native American culture is entwined in Fargo, and that's something that Fargo needs to recognize. And I think that's any city in the country.
Mhm.
It really needs to not say we are this community and we have Native Americans over here.
Correct.
We are a thread in that fabric, that we're not additional.
Yeah. We're not the token.
No, we're not. We're
not the token element.
Hmm.
Art bridges contemporary and traditional elements. How do you feel, or what is the balance between honoring cultural traditions, right, and expressing individual artistic vision?
Hmm. I think Native American art is one of in contemporary terms, is one of the unique aspects of contemporary art where we are inherently tied to our culture and to our past, right? It's really what ties us to what this is. I will say that the vast majority of contemporary Native American artists will say they're an artist first who happens to be Native American. Absolutely right. I will never push back against that. But our practice is also a practice of culture. Oscar Howe, if I can go back to Oscar Howe, but his generation, they all started by depictions of ceremony, right? Dorothy Dunn really pushed this idea with them that they had to depict ceremony, and it was a wide lens. So like on the canvas, you had to show everybody on the seat. It was like a theater production, right? You had to have the whole set. You had everything there. And Oscar gave permission to everyone to focus in on the individual and the individual experience, still practicing ceremony. I mean, the vast majority of his work is traditional Native American art or imagery, but he was pushing for what the subject was experiencing within that space. And so I just got lost on my own tangent there on what your question was. I'm sorry.
The balance of honoring cultural traditions and expressing individual artistic vision,
Mm-hmm.
and bridging traditional and contemporary elements.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's that's a good question.
Again, you can borrow it.
Yeah, I'm struggling formulating an answer here. You know, I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I can go. I have another question because it was something I wanted to understand and know more about, is the program at the Art Institute, and what that entails.
Yeah. You know, I think what gives me hesitancy to answer the question is I don't want to speak for artists, right? Even as a curator, I mean, ultimately that's sort of what I do when I put an exhibition up. I translate what the artist is saying, because I do find that the majority of contemporary artwork is a reflection of contemporary times, and so whether it's Brad Kalhammer in New York City, you know, gosh, I'm just thinking of John Hitchcock in Wisconsin. So much of the work has contemporary elements, but also based in with traditional either symbolism or iconography.
I think, you see the ebb and flow of Native American artistry now, and some are taking some very indicative traditional elements and incorporating into a contemporary environment. Others are taking contemporary, the now, and playing a twist on it and telling their story. And it's interesting how that story continuously through the people that we've had on this show. There's always a binding thread, even though it's very traditional or very contemporary. There's always a binding thread that's pulling it together. So being a person on the other side and interviewing Native American artists and doing exhibits, I wanted to get your perspective of, have you seen that as well, and what your take on it is? Because right now we're on this high of the ebb and flow, but hopefully it continues forward. It's not something that's just a passing phase. We've made a permanent presence that we're not going anywhere. We've been here for a long time. So
true. I wonder if maybe this is sort of a version of what Reservation Dogs is doing right now. It focuses on these four young kids who are dealing with very contemporary issues in a modern community. But then they tie in traditional characters into the storytelling element. One for comedic humor. I mean, Dallas Goldtooth, William Knifeman, of course, genius. You have other characters, traditional characters that come through there.
And it's still part of our story, and we're still interconnected, I think. And I mean, I'm not the writer of the show, obviously, but I think that's why they play on it, that it's still part of us, no matter if it's 200, 300, 600 years ago. That's part of our DNA, and we connect to it in today's environment, no matter how long that span of time goes by.
Yeah. I think the thing too is that we're as Native and Indigenous artists, we're forced to live in two worlds. I mean, this is something I hear quite a bit. And a lot of titles of their shows kind of play on this. Where yes, we are contemporary people living here and now. We all have smartphones of some sort. We watch films on streaming and whatnot. But then there's a pressure both by external society and our traditional communities too, that we have to remain, we have to sort of acknowledge where we come from, not to lose that humanity. And it plays maybe subtly and not so subtly in everything we do. I mean, I don't know if I can show this to you, but I mean, I have my own LLC that I use to produce my podcast, and it's a medicine wheel. It's a modern version of it,
Right.
but it's sort of a tie into that culture that I come from, and so I think, yeah, it's a way of us to stay connected to our community, because I think back to when I was a kid, when I went to the Oscar Howe program for the first time. It was my first time away from home, and it was really scary being away from what I knew, being in this new world all by myself. And in a sense, that's, I think, what most artists go through. We're out there. It's so different from what we grew up with. It keeps us grounded. It just keeps us grounded, I suppose.
And if you think back upon it, the educational systems and schooling, it's not that long ago. People think, oh, that happened 200, 300. No, it did not happen that long ago. It's in recent history.
Mm-hmm.
So to go back, tell us about the program at the Art Institute.
Oh, okay. We're talking about the summer
Yes.
institute.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, like I said, when I was a kid, I went to this the Oscar Howe Summer Art Institute at USD. 2-week program. They teach you the fundamentals of drawing, painting, printmaking, and then depending on the year, a variety of different things. Ceramics. We did flute making one year. Just different things, and it was really the gateway for me to get into college. It let me know the potential that I had and the support that was out there. So I was involved with that for about 14 years, I think, from 93 to about 2007. And eventually, when I became director of Native programs at the Plains Art Museum, I found myself in the unique situation where I could create a program like that as well. And so I contacted USD, basically talked to Corey Nedler, the director of the art department there. I said, hey, can I steal you guys' idea and do my own? And he laughed. He said, like, of course. Because we had recognized in that program, because I was a staff person, the last part of it, that we needed more of those programs out there. More high school kids needed to be exposed to that programming to inspire them to find their way to college or figure out what they wanted to do. So, so every summer at the up in Fargo there, we have a 2-week summer program. It's basically the same thing. We invite 12 to 20 students per summer. It's an intense program. It's not art camp, right? They're not there to have fun. In 2 weeks, they'll do 90 studio hours of work, which is about 13 hours a day of artwork. At the end of that experience, we all hang the artwork up in the museum, and so they get an art exhibition of their work in an accredited art museum. And we have a reception for them. We have community come in, and they get a chance to be able to speak about their work too. And I'm proud to say that a number of those students have since gone on to college and to art programs and are being very successful. We don't take the credit for that. We just sort of introduced them to it. It's their hard work that got them there. And so, and these are some, I hate to say accomplished for someone who is in their teenage years, but the work that they're doing is outstanding. And I think back when I was their age, there was no way I was doing their level of work. And so it just makes me feel good that they're doing what they're doing.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's huge and amazing. It's like you're setting the path for them to find their own path to success.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's wonderful.
What feels good too is that, I remember being their age, and Robert Penn would be sharing stories that he received from Oscar Howe. He would say, Dr. Howe would say this or that, and he showed me, how to stretch paper, to watercolor paint and whatnot. And I find myself telling the same stories of what Mr. Penn told me to these kids. And so it just feels good to be able to sort of, not to get all traditional, but, having like oral history stories, from one generation to the next, now to this next generation. And it feels good to be able to pass along those stories to those kids who can do what they want with that.
So on the exhibit side, how long are your exhibits up, and what's the ramp up time, and what do you have current and what's in the future?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah. So our exhibitions are generally up between 6 to 8 months, depending on the exhibitions. It takes a good couple years to get that going. I think like most institutions, we reach out to either the single artist or the group of artists. We kind of put the call out to what we want to do. And then it's just the process of making sure that they have the work ready. We have our registrar who does all the logistics of getting the artwork here, insurance and all that. And we generally like to have everything sort of ready to go a few months out before the exhibition opens. Get the artwork here, minimum of 3 weeks beforehand, get everything hung. And then it's up for 6 to 8 months, depending on what the exhibition is. We currently have Gerald Knoyer up right now. It's a 25-year retrospective of his work. It's about to come down at the end of September. And then on October 21st, we are having an exhibition on Oscar Howe and about his studio practice. Oh. So while there's the amazing Dakota Modern exhibition that's happening right now, that I think is going to be closing up here pretty soon, which is currently showing at the Brookings Art Museum. Oh my gosh, I'm messing up the name of their institution. Google it. Oscar Howe and Brookings. It is a fantastic exhibition. They did a great job there. I think it's the South Dakota Art Museum. So that's there, but we're focusing more on his studio process. So we'll have items from his actual studio in the space there, and the patrons will be able to see the drawings and the finished paintings, and they'll be able to see that process on how he did that. And so that will be opening up on October 21st, and will be open through March of 2024.
Okay.
And the museum's free, so anyone can come check it out.
And what's next for you in your other craft?
Well, I'm hoping the writer's strike comes to a swift resolution. It's right now, I'm just working on some commissions, and I guess we'll see what happens. The nice thing about storyboards is those projects are kind of short. They're sort of a several month period. So I'm hoping that as soon as the strike ends, we can start having conversations again, and we can move forward with new projects. So
So it's time to plug your own podcast, Joe. Tell us about your podcast, when it's on, where people can tune in. And
sure thing. Well, thank you for that. It's great. It's 5 Plain Questions. It's anywhere you find your favorite podcasts, they're on there. So just the number 5 Plain, PLAIN, like the Northern Plains, questions. Each episode is anywhere between 25 minutes to 50 minutes long, depending on the guest. We interview artists, musicians, culture bears, people doing community work. Just if they're in the arts or they're doing something really important, they'll be on the show. The last couple of weeks, we've had TV writers and actors. We had Bobby Wilson this last week. We had McGizzy Pensanu the week before. They're both 1491s. And Ty LeClaire, who was one of the writers and editors for Rutherford Falls, the NBC show that lasted, I think, 2 seasons. Great show.
Yeah.
they're all comedians too. I love having comedians on the show. I don't know if you've had an opportunity. They do, and they don't care what they say, and I love it. They just go with it. So
few mic bombs.
Yep. So, yeah, I would say probably comedians are my favorite guests to have, just because there's such good energy. But yeah.
So you're weekly, and when is a new episode launch? What day?
Every Wednesday. Every Wednesday, February through November. So, I am traveling, so there may be a slight pause in the next couple of weeks for the podcasts. We'll see what happens. For the most part, up until there was a slight pause in June, I had not missed a Wednesday in 3 years. So we'll see what happens. But any which way, there's plenty of episodes for one to catch up on if they're new to it. So yeah.
Congratulations. You said 4 years, 150 episodes?
Yep. We're in season 4 right now. Yeah. So yeah.
Knock on wood, maybe we'll last that long.
It goes by fast. How large is your staff? Or are you?
There's 2 of us, myself and Jesse, the producer, and we're weekly. Our first show launched in January of this year, so we're 8 months in.
America Meredith, she was your first guest.
She was our first guest. Yeah.
Yep.
So far so good. We're Audible, so all the platforms, and we're also on YouTube. So we add that element as well. So yeah, we're coming up on a year. I mean, we interviewed America, I think last November. So it's been a year. So yeah,
well,
it's
congratulations.
Fun. Oh, thank you.
It is fun. It is fun. It definitely comes through, and it's so important what you're doing. I've urged a lot of folks, and I've mentored a number of people who've wanted to become to do podcasts. I think it's really important for us to do this work, to get out there, because I can't interview everyone. It's just not possible. And so the more of us doing this work is so important, and we all approach it a little differently. And I think it's really important that there is a variety out there and that there are options.
Absolutely.
So congratulations. You're doing an amazing job, and I couldn't be happier that you're doing this.
I appreciate that. Same to you. Well, Joe, any closing comments?
I would say for the listener, support your local artist. Art is it's hard work. Artists need to be paid for their work, so don't shortchange them.
Absolutely.
Native, indigenous music and podcasts and shows are all out there, and what's coming out so good right now. I mean, we are in a season right now of really good stuff, and so yeah,
I believe that.
Thank you for this.
Surely. Well, it's been an honor and a pleasure, and I was so glad to meet you finally and to have this time to chat. And thank you again, and congrats. I mean, 4 years. I'm going to try to aspire to what you've been doing. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This is wonderful.
Absolutely.